Hey, Link here. Thanks for joining me for episode 93, where I speak with Akash Thakkar, where we talk about how they got into the industry, how they realized making game music was a possibility, their perfect game, games that didn't age well, their favorite recent trend in games, their life outside of games, and some lightning round questions. Before we get started, don't forget there are links in the episode description that you can follow to learn more about Akash as well as the podcast. Also, don't forget to like and share the episode, and without further ado, enjoy episode 93. Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Akash Thakkar, sound designer that has contributed to projects such as Heat Signature, Hyperlight Drifter, Outer Wilds Echoes of the Eye, and is currently contributing to Heart Machine's Hyper Light Breaker. Hi Akash, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for making the time to be here. I'm happy that you're able to be here and let me steal some of your time and bug you with some questions.
Oh, I'm excited.
Well, awesome. Good. I'm happy to hear that. Before we get started, though, do you mind telling me and anyone that's listening a little bit about yourself? Kind of like, the elevator pitch to who you are, or like the bare minimums to the things that you think people absolutely need to know who you are before we jump in.
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, my name's Akash Thakkar. I'm a sound designer based in Seattle. I've been working in the industry for about 12 years now as a full-time freelancer in game audio specifically. And I spend a lot of my time sound designing for projects and a lot of time helping other people who are in the game audio world find work and get paid. And that's kind of become a main passion of mine, is helping other people get that K-ish, because it's an artistic field. It's one of those artistic fields that, like many, if you don't know what you're doing in terms of the business side, you can work on all sorts of cool projects and still be broke. So that is something that I like to help people with quite a bit nowadays.
So, thank you for that quick rundown. And I particularly like the idea of helping people get paid because, as I'm sure you've seen in your own circles, that every now and then it comes up that, just recently, the one that circled here, because I'll just call this one as a direct reference because it's easier, was someone asking an illustrator for a full 52 card tarot deck for like $5,000,
God.
which comes down to like, I think it was like $50 a card or something like that. But like, the misunderstanding of how easy it is to get taken advantage of by like younger people or fresher people, or however you want to put it, in an industry that is like a passion industry or what have you, is so easy. So it's so cool that you are out there effectively, telling people, no, they need to pay you.
Yes.
This is how you, like, this is the way to think about getting paid. This is the way to think about your rates to get paid. Get paid. Eat your dinner,
Yes. Exactly. Yes. Enjoy your life, please, God.
Yeah. And I have a background in design, and I only mention that because I very much know how easy it is to lose sight of certain things, and also how easy it is to like, oh yeah, I can do all of these things for little money because the mentality of if I take 10 projects to make rent instead of what should be like 2 projects to make rent or whatever, but that also screws over everyone else.
Yes,
like
exactly.
The rising tide raises all ships, but the leaving tide also grounds out everyone, kind of thing. Right. So it's anyway. So I'm just saying, I know I on from a very different personal level can very much respect the what you're trying to do, like what you're helping people get done. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, I'm so glad. Yeah, because it's wildly important, and I always light up when someone texts me and it's like, I got 10 times the amount that I thought I should get for this gig. It's like, yeah, There's money on the table. You just got to ask for it.
Yes, yeah, and yes, especially in today's economy when you don't know when that next gig
Mm-hmm.
might come, get
Totally.
what you can get, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Uh, Now, I do want to ask this because you said you've been doing this for about 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm curious if you don't mind sharing how it is you got into doing this 12 or so years ago.
Yeah. So basically, I started off in the world of audio as a drummer. So I grew up playing the drums, and it wasn't my choice. I actually didn't want to. My parents basically, and this is like the immigrant parent mentality of like, you will play an instrument because it will help you get into Harvard. But my parents made the foolish decision of instead of choosing for me, they let me choose. So I chose the drums, the loudest and most obnoxious instrument absolutely possible. And I wasn't like some natural, I didn't take to it right away. I'm not like 99.9% of bios you read on any full-time audio person's website of like, oh, and then the bird sung to me and I played. So like, no, like I hated it. It was a thing I was forced to do. But eventually over time it just became the only thing I could do. Like I was never good at school. I wasn't like a troublemaker or anything, but I was literally bad at every class. There was nothing I was like a natural at. So it just kind of naturally became like, well, this is a thing that I can have 1% of a command of. I might as well put time into it. So it eventually got to the point where I started enjoying it. And that's kind of an interesting thing in and of itself of like I hated it and then eventually learned to love it. Ended up practicing quite a bit, like 8 hours a day, every day, much to the chagrin of my parents having to listen to that. And then eventually, the very quick version is eventually ended up going to music school. And I wanted to do that not to get into video games or anything like that. I loved games. It's all I played. Or like I didn't watch movies or anything. I just played video games. But I went to music school to be a performer. So I had long hair down to my butt, and I had like a big beard, and people would constantly ask what drugs I was selling, even though I'm straight edge and still am to this day. Like I am the worst person to ask. I don't know what a weed looks like, but it like that's what I ended up doing was like wanting to be a performer and went to music school to do that. And over time, as I kind of got more and more into performing, I ended up performing with video game orchestras. I've performed with Nobuo Uematsu, the composer of Final Fantasy, which was like the big peak moment for me, and was like, cool, I did it. Like there's nothing in it here for me anymore. I am no longer interested in this thing. And so because I was exposed to video game music, thanks to being in that environment at music school, I eventually ended up pivoting and deciding like, okay, I want to do like this whole video game music thing. It suits my introverted self much more than performing. I get to stay at home. That sounds awesome. I get to basically be on a computer all day. That sounds rad as hell. You're telling me I don't need to like leave the house to do and this rules. Like, what are you talking about? So it kind of eventually became this thing that I wanted to do. And thankfully, again, super lucky, Berkeley started to have video game audio classes, like some really basic ones starting to come in just at this perfect time. So I took those, got super interested, and the professor at the time was named Michael Sweet, super cool guy. I have a lot to thank him for getting me into this side of things. But that exposed me to, video game music and things like video game audio implementation and the tech side of things and all these sorts of things, and even exposed me to going out and networking with people in the local game industry in Boston where I was going to school. So I started working on student projects and game jams and stuff like that. And over time, that just kind of shifted into me becoming more and more of someone who just did game audio. Like I stopped practicing drums basically entirely as much as I could. So like I basically did enough to pass school, and that was it, just to get through music school. But it was basically pretty clear. It's like, oh, okay, like game audio is the thing that I really want to do. So after graduating, I went to, instead of moving to LA, which is where everyone goes after going to music school, and that's where musicians go to die. It's like the elephant graveyard of audio. I decided to go to Seattle instead, where no one was going. But I knew it had a huge tech scene. I didn't know a soul at all here. And I just knew like, okay, there's a big tech scene. No one from music school is going there. That means clearly there's going to be a lot of work for me and no audio people. So I come out here and I was pretty much correct. Like I was one of the few freelancers, people who wasn't tied down to like a company like Microsoft or Nintendo or Valve or anything like that, who was saying, "Hey, I would like to do sound design for your indie game." And people were like, "Oh my God, please, we need you," which is not a thing that most audio people are used to. Usually it's get away, you vulture. It's like, stop talking to me. But that was the opposite, at least in the early days of Seattle. So I started to drum up work. It wasn't nothing paid super well. Like, I like, there are definitely months where paying rent was a 30th of the month, and I'm like, please check come through, and I would like have an indie game that just happened to work out. I just barely was able to pay rent. So that happened an awful lot. It wasn't the smooth process by any means. But over time, just by kind of showing up, going to networking events, that sort of thing, you start to build more and more projects, you start to get more and more games, you work on bigger and bigger things. And over time, that just kind of snowballed into becoming someone who has, a consistent stream of work. There are feast and famine periods. There still will be, even 12 years in. That doesn't stop by any means. But over time, that just became a full-time thing. And now it's just the thing I do now. And when people are kind of breaking into this field, it's what I recommend they do, is just show up as consistently as possible, ideally in person. That's not possible for everybody, but as in person as you can, and just become a trusted person in the network of video game development, because it's such a small scene. Even today, even though it's bigger than it ever has been, it's still super small. And you will eventually kind of outlast everyone who quits, which is a lot of people. And that leads you to becoming someone people can hire, because the amount of people who are doing audio is astronomical. There's tons and tons of it. But the amount of people who are doing audio who stick to it and are mentally stable are like 0.0001%. So if you can make it so that it's like, people are like, "Oh, you are someone who won't try to eat my face through the internet. Cool, here's a job." It eventually gets to that point where it's like, "Oh, you will actually..." The first gig I had, I remember, they were shocked that I didn't steal the money and disappeared. And this was like a established company. They were absolutely shocked. Like, a freelancer who doesn't just take the money and go, oh my God. It blew their minds. So it's like, oh, okay, the bar is in hell. It's just very few people are stepping over it. And it just takes a really long time to be known enough where people will trust you to step over that really, really low bar where it's like, okay, just don't steal their money. All right, got it. So it takes a long time, but that is something I recommend people do. And that's kind of how it started for me.
So, there's a few things to comment on, I guess you would say. Comment's the best case for me right now. First, usually I like to ask, words of wisdom, but it's you covered that on your own. So thank you for that. I really like your words of wisdom, if I understood correctly, is basically just show up and do the work and be a decent person while doing the work. Which, when you follow up with where the bar is set, I completely understand that. And going back to the comment about that company that wanted to pay so low for a full tarot card deck or what have you. It's on the flip side of that one, in terms of that one's a bad client. I'm sure you've also seen when probably not from people you personally know, because usually people in my life that are trying to better themselves aren't the ones bringing this kind of negative attention to themselves. But as I'm sure you've also seen, there's stories of people in like the indie scene or what have you that everyone typically tends to avoid, just because the as you said, they ate someone's face, and they're out there eating faces, and finally someone says, "Hey, yeah, that guy eats faces," and suddenly everyone else starts piping up with, "Oh yeah, they ate my face a week ago."
Totally.
So like it's crazy to hear that as the advice, but at the same time, it makes sense when you've seen it popping off so many times, and it's like you just think, okay, that has to be a one-off, but then it's like, okay, no, it's not.
No, it's definitely not.
So thank you for that advice. I like I said, I think that's great advice. Do the work, show up, be nice, because it's one of those things where uh, if that's part of networking, right? Like it's not just trying to get someone to get you another job. It's being someone
Hmm.
that people like and can recommend because
Hmm.
you were nice with them. You're easy to recommend. They'll probably be nice of someone else and all that. So thank you for
Exactly.
that. I think that's great advice.
Mm.
I do want to comment on the hilarity of of you being told you're going to play an instrument,
Hmm.
so you spite your parents to by picking a drum, and I imagine that was probably the thing they hated the most right out the gate because anyone that started the drums or anyone that knows someone that has started learning drums, the first handful
Oh,
of period is just it's not like it's like any instrument, right? Like when you start to learn a guitar or whatever, it's either they're
yeah.
missing notes or but with a drum, it's much louder. It's
Oh,
not like they're
yes.
sitting in their room alone, oh, I hit the wrong, string or whatever. They're
Hmm.
bashing the hell out of
Hmm.
everything. And if you're doing it to spite your parents, I imagine there was even more of that. It's like, I know this is the wrong note, but it makes more noise and just hit it a few
Right.
extra times, right?
Absolutely. And I had the I think the worst drum set ever made as my first one, which makes sense because why would my parents spend any amount of money on a thing that I didn't want to do? It was the worst drum set ever made. So the stands would crash and fall over constantly, like just by playing. So not only would I be bad at it, but it would break constantly and make more noise, and then I have to reassemble it, which would make more noise, and it was just this constant, like, constant just smashing, breaking, resetting every single day.
So, I'm going to make a leap here, and I'm not the child of an immigrant that had this kind of mentality forced on me. However, I am a child, or I am a person that, as a child, was forced to do things I didn't like to do, and so I think this will kind of line up nicely, regardless. That being able to take those small victories, I imagine felt great. When it was something you
Mhm.
didn't want to do, being like, I'm gonna do this. Oh, I didn't tighten it enough. Oops, it fell and made even
Oops.
more noise.
Yep, totally, 100%. Yes, that was a constant thing. Like, "Oops, need a new drum head, I guess that broke."
Which even at that point, drums aren't cheap either. The heads or whatever. So like
Oh, no, they aren't cheap.
so I think anyone that's listening that as a child just wanted to be able to have that kind of screw you control. I think they're probably envious of you. Let's be honest. I'm a little envious of you in that case. Um, but gosh, but thank you for sharing all of that. I appreciate that story. The wisdom. Um, and I'm curious because you had also said, that you had been playing games. That was kind of like all you really wanted to do. You didn't want to watch movies or what have
Right.
you. It was games. So like, I'm wondering in this scenario, like, was there a specific game at some point that when you realized what you could do with I'm just going to say sound or audio,
Mhm,
when you realized like audio was an actual path, was
mhm.
there a specific game that made you go, oh, I could connect these things? Or was it kind of one of those things where once you got into audio, you realized, oh, I could easily connect these things? I
Mhm. It
hope
was
I
more
hope that makes sense. Sorry.
totally, totally. It's more the second thing because I enjoyed video game music since I was very little. Like my first game I remember playing and enjoying the music was Mega Man 3, and I would constantly listen to that soundtrack just by turning the game on and like standing in one spot. So there wasn't a clear through line in my head of, oh, someone is doing this. That didn't click until college. And I would even do the thing that I know a lot of other people did where they would like grab a boombox and record the music to tape using the sound test in the options menu. I would do that all the time with, Sega Genesis games. I remember distinctly doing that with the entire soundtrack for an obscure-ish fighting game called Art of Fighting, which was a rival to Street Fighter that was way worse in every way. But I loved the soundtrack of that game, so I'd record everything from sound test. But it wasn't until college where I was like, oh, wait, humans do this. Cool. But there were moments growing up, Halo 1 being an example, where I distinctly recall being like, oh, check out this pistol sound, everybody. And nobody gave any, like, regard to these pistol sounds except me. Not a soul cared about the audio. They cared about the music because Halo music is iconic, but I was the only one being like, oh man, that's really cool how they made this charge up sound. Huh, I wonder how that's pretty neat. But it did again, it didn't click until college.
So, and that's fair because I've spoken to a handful of people, a small handful at this point in time. As we're recording episode in the 90s, just a small handful. Um, and like it always amuses me because I went through this as well. I think everyone kind of does, but I always like hearing about that moment where people are like not realizing, they just think that like the games just come into existence, kind of like
Right.
people, right? Like they just they're born into it somehow and they just exist, and then that moment where you go, oh wait, there's a bunch of people that contributed to
Hmm.
this, right? Like I always like hearing about that just because it's wild to me because it's something that most people have went through, and it's one of those things where it's like, how, like, why did I not realize that? Like why did I have to suddenly go, oh wait, this is how this happens? Because like how else would it happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. It just for some reason just never clicks until it does.
Yeah. Um. Now I am curious then, just because now you had mentioned uh, the Halo pistol sound. I don't think this is going
Hmm.
to quite relate to this, but Mega Man, I think,
Hmm.
might be more relatable in this scenario. But did you have like a favorite game or like a perfect game, or if you will, like a Ratatouille style game that's the game that you when you play it or whatever, it brings you back to that moment, or how, like, however you wish to interpret the question, because I know
Hmm.
the question of a favorite game or like a perfect game can be a little ambiguous or a little
Sure.
difficult because on the spot especially, but like did you have a game like that? And by all means take that however, whatever direction you wish, because like I said, I know it's ambiguous and I know it's not an easy answer even when you
Hmm.
think you're prepared for it.
Right, totally. And I got two answers for you. So one is a game called Okami, which came out for like the GameCube and PlayStation 2, made by the people who made Beautiful Joe. And Okami is a game that is very Zelda-like in nature, and you play an adorable wolf god running around doing Zelda things, like solving little puzzles and fighting bosses and all that sort of stuff in a big open world. And it was an absolute Zelda killer. Like it took until Breath of the Wild for them to catch up to what Okami did. And I loved that game so much. I think that was like my perfect game because the music, the sound, the writing, I teared up at the ending. It meant so much to me to have this game that was so beautiful, funny, wonderfully written with great characters and hugely memorable moments with an incredible 4-disc soundtrack. I absolutely loved that game. It's a shame it weirdly sold really well in the US, even, and it had like a very Japanese old style watercolor art style that was very unique, and did very poorly in Japan, which is exactly the opposite of what you'd expect. But unfortunately, that game kind of came and went, and very few people ended up playing it. But that was one of my favorites that really, really hit me, and I still think about it all the time and how good it was. But also, a kind of second answer to that is the Metal Gear Solid series. And growing up, I played 1, 2, and 3, and then 4 and 5 came out much later, but I played the hell out of those too. And when I played through the Metal Gear Solid series, they just felt right because they were so serious and so absurd at the same time. Where you can have a historically accurate conversation about nuclear proliferation, followed by a scene of a guy pooping his pants, and it plays it completely straight, and it all works and makes perfect sense from scene A to scene B, with, of course, full voice acting, which at the time of Metal Gear Solid 1 was completely unheard of, with great voice actors, an actual, Hollywood cast. That was completely unheard of. So it was this totally immersive thing, and I still remember playing the Metal Gear Solid 1 demo disc over and over and over and over, and the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo disc over and over and over and over, because they just hit so perfectly. And I'm still to this day just the worst Hideo Kojima pervert in existence. Like, it's just I love just his brand of nonsense so much that I mean, I'm still playing whatever he makes. Played the Death Stranding. I'll play whatever absolute anime nonsense he makes next. But those were two very formative games for me that made me go like, oh my god, these are something special, and I am so immersed in them, and I feel such a deep connection that still stands to this day.
So, thank you for sharing that. And just a few things to quickly follow up on. One being, the mention of Zelda not catching up. Now, I'm not going to try and argue that. That's not what I'm bringing up in this moment. But what I am gonna counter with is, I don't know if it really did take that long to catch up, because Twilight Princess did have a wolf.
It
I'm just
did
gonna
have a wolf.
throw
It
that
wasn't
out
as
there.
cute of a wolf.
Um, uh, like I said, I'm not trying to argue, just pointing that out there, that there was a wolf. But no, as someone that did play Okami, I never
Yes.
ended up beating it, because
Oh,
when it came out, I was very much not in a position where I was able to afford all the games that I
hmm.
wanted to play. However, I was able to afford Swap Magic and the plastic knife to do the knife trick on a PS2. Um, and what ended up happening was, I was trying to circumvent doing Swap Magic and the knife trick and set up the hard drive and everything. I actually blew away the memory card that
Oh,
had Okami on it.
oh
So that
no.
meant I never went back to Okami,
Yep,
because I
that's the
was
end of that.
halfway more than, yeah. So it was like, well, okay, that's the end of that. I lost a lot of saves. That was
Oh,
a,
I
a
bet.
very
Oh,
frustrating time. Um,
yes.
but I've always wanted to get back to it. I think I own it for the PS3, like digital,
Oh,
when it was
yes,
like super
yes.
cheap and or what have you. So like I own it somewhere at this point from like a sale, but I've just never had the time to
Hmm.
devote to it. And it's one of those things where it kind of like eats away at me. Because it's like, well, I know how great it was. I know how much I enjoyed it when I did play it, and like I don't think there's many people that have anything negative to say about it,
Right.
right? So
Totally.
that's why I say it kind of weighs on me, because it's like, you know, when you hear really popular games or really cult classic games or what have you, and you're like, I've always wanted to, give time to it, but you just can't,
It's so
right?
tough. Yeah, especially later. It gets harder and harder.
Yes, especially when like by the time you do have time to sit down to it, your backlog is huge, and you're now like, well, I have all these other games I need to get through.
Exactly.
But no, so thank you for sharing that. And like, I understand the appreciation to anime nonsense from Kojima's stuff. That is one of the things I uh will praise him for, is that everything is just anime nonsense.
Yes.
Um, no matter how you no matter how you try and approach it, it's like there's no other way to do it. Like, I know that some people I've spoken to, they try and paint Metal Gear as a different thing, and that's
Hmm.
fine if how that's they
Yeah,
interpret it,
totally.
right? But like, at the end of the day, anyone that has watched any amount of anime or what have you is going to step back and be like, no, this is just
This is
anime
just
nonsense.
anime.
Like, yeah, like there's like it's even broken up into episodes, kind of, with like the
Kind
way
of, yeah,
the way
exactly.
the missions cards and everything
Yep.
is set up, right? So like, anyway, thank you for sharing all of that. I appreciate that. The reminder that I have to at some point get back to Okami. Um,
Yes.
at some point. Um, but no, thank you for that. And I do want to ask this one, um, just because we just talked about two games that were really good, that you really enjoy.
Hmm.
And I don't know why I'm being mean, and I want to flip the coin on you here, but if there's, I'm wondering if there were games that you really enjoyed as a kid that you've tried to get back into, as like an adult, and been like, I don't have the patience of a child anymore, or what have you.
I don't have any like specific answers of like this is it, but I can answer in a broad sense where I love, and I still love these games, but I cannot give them the time anymore. All the old JRPGs, right? Like they were amazing. I love them. I still appreciate them. Like they're a great example. And this game is good. I want to be clear. This isn't a game that I'm like, oh, I thought it was good as a kid, but it sucks now. No, it's still very like incredible. But there's a game called Legend of Dragoon, which I loved. It was Sony being like, we can be Square Enix too, and they nailed it. They absolutely 100% nailed it. But there are so many games like that now that I'm like, just like what you were saying, I desperately want to get back into these. Can't, never can. Literally, absolutely never can. There's too much. They take too much time. I want the game to heal me between battles. I never want to use a potion again. Like there are all these like design decisions that have been designed away by modern games that have spoiled me and have made me a soft, kingly figure that doesn't want to use his fingers too much. And so like I can't really get back into those. But I don't have a specific game of like this game was good as a kid, but boy does it suck now.
You know, yes, I understand completely what you're saying, and like I agree, because like, you know, in the same mindset, because you know, for anyone that's played RPGs, JRPGs and stuff, and they're newer ones that they've played, or that's all they're familiar with, or whatever. What you just said is probably nonsense, right?
Right.
However, like when you look at old Super Nintendo or PS1 RPGs or PS2 RPGs, because I honestly I can't put my finger on when the trend kind of shifted, but like they weren't 40 hours because the story was 40 hours. They were 40
Right.
hours because you grinded for 36 of those
Exactly.
40. Now,
Yes.
you know, that's one of the things I love the most about when I do have time, because they're still long games now. JRPGs are
Hmm.
still, you know, huge.
Definitely.
However, they're not huge because you're like, well, I gotta go grind again. Like,
Hmm.
if you look at like Persona 3, you know, you spent a lot of time grinding, and then between 3 and 4, it was kind of set up that by the time you made it to the boss, you should be at the level you need to
Hmm.
be. Um, and like that's when I started going, oh wow, this quality of life thing is beautiful. And
Yeah.
like now when you play a JRPG, by the time you get to the next big thing, you've been given enough like side quests or just
Hmm.
the way it's set up to flow. You're prepared to be there more or less, right? Like
Hmm.
you could take an extra 20 minutes and do a little bit of on the side and be extra ready or what have you. But like, you know, back then you played an RPG for a summer, and it wasn't because you were
Right.
it took the summer. It's because you were like, well, this boss ain't ready. I'm not ready for this boss yet. Go and grind for an hour or three. And you did
Hmm.
that constantly. So, you know, I understand exactly what you're saying. And for anyone
Hmm.
that, you know, is not familiar with those older games, it, that's what it is. Go play an older game and feel the pain of not
Right.
having the quality of life of shaving off all of this time. You know, like I the yellow paint debate or the mini map debate or whatever comes up, and it's like, no, I like knowing what I'm supposed to be doing next.
Yes. Oh my
I
God.
like being ushered gently or not
Yes.
gently in some cases, because
Hmm.
sometimes I'm a big idiot and I'm like, I don't see the thing I need to do. Um,
Exactly.
but like I love that. I love being told, no, just go over here, sweet child. Just
Yep.
go that way. You're okay.
Yep.
Go into that room. Just go into that room. You're like, oh, hey, this is the room.
Oh.
It's like you know, I love it. And from
Yes.
the
one
sounds
Hundred
of it, I
percent.
think that's very much the same boat for
Oh
you.
yeah. I could not be more in agreement. I've become soft and emperor like in my countenance, but I will not go back.
You know, there are some old JRPGs and such that I want to go back to, and every time I'm
Hmm.
like sitting down to do it, I'm like, do I do I really want to? Like I'm signing up for a lot of grind. And
Hmm.
then, you know, I think about it for a minute, and then I spend 5 seconds looking on I forget the name, game engine or whatever, cheat engine, and going,
Oh yeah.
just where's the hex? Where's the hex that I can just dump XP stuff in
Right.
that makes me level quicker? I'm like, oh cool,
Yeah.
it took me 5 minutes to find. I will now devote the hour
Yes.
and a half, like the 3, 4, 5 hours to this game instead of 40. Like,
Yes. Exactly. Get the
um,
story and get out.
basically, yes. It's like I'm here for the journey, not not
Right.
the fight the same enemy for an hour going, okay,
Exactly.
cool. Did I get the level? Did I get the one item drop I need? Like,
Hmm.
but no, thank you, thank you for that. And like I said, I know that was kind of like a mean question to flip
No, I
side,
love it.
but so I'm also curious about this just because, you know, um I sorry, I lost the potential transition there. I was about to ask a question. I looked at the my list and I'm like, I'm like, what did I just do to myself? Um, uh, so let me ask this one then.
Mhm.
I'll phrase this uh and ramble till I get to there. So, you started about 12 years ago, and about 12 years
Mhm.
ago was kind of when the indie scene started to um kind of pop off, right? Like
Yeah,
the
definitely.
the the scene that it exists as today, 12 years ago would have been when it was just getting to that full swing, which
Hmm.
means I'm going to make the presumption that you've seen a fair amount of trends that have like started rising up that have probably also hit their peak since then, since like
Yeah.
roguelikes, for example,
Hmm.
has started and like they're really hitting their peak now or what have you. I'm wondering if there's like a trend that you've seen when you first started that was coming along or what have you that you really have enjoyed getting to see, exist as it is today.
Yeah, that's a
And
great question.
so yeah, so like I don't know of all of the trends because sometimes I'm just blind to them. Like roguelike is the
Sure.
one I enjoy, so that's what I see. But however, I presume from your side of things, they'll be a little different. So by all means, I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you.
This will sound like a weird term for a trend, but I am thrilled that single player is back. So we had this period, this I call it the very sad dark times, from like 2012-ish, maybe like 2010 to I would say rough guess like 2021, where it was all live service or the equivalent thereof at the time, multiplayer, zero story, absolutely no narrative, like even Battlefield games or I think it's Battlefield. I can't I don't think it was Call of Duty, but maybe Call of Duty did this too, where they were like, we're not even going to put a single player mode in because no one cares. And it's true, like at the time no one cared. It was just get me into multiplayer. Everyone wants to push button as fast as possible. And then that's when I started to discover I'm like, oh, not most people, but a lot more people than I thought skip 100% of cutscenes in games and just like mash X so they can get the colors as fast as possible. And that drove me absolutely insane and still drives me insane that there are still people who are like, I just skip every cutscene. Like that's how I play games. I'll buy a story-based game and then skip absolutely every cutscene and then not know what's happening and then downvote it on Steam. Like what the hell is happening? But I am so glad because we're kind of coming into out, especially now with all the AAAs firing everybody. There's more and more indies kind of coming up again because this is what happened in 2012, 2008 ish. Is all the AAAs less impactful than now? It's way worse now. But all these AAAs started firing everybody, and everyone said, "Okay, well, I'll make my own damn game." And then that's happening again, and we're seeing more and more of an uptick in indie and like double A, those sorts of games, and more of an investment in single player games or games that are primarily narrative focused. Like Baldur's Gate could not be a better example of a game that sold 1 trillion copies, is narrative based, and has great multiplayer integration, but the multiplayer integration isn't PvP like what all the executives think people want. Here is this single player package that people actually want to pay for in droves to ridiculous, like way more than any of the big multiplayer games that people think people want. So it makes me really happy to see this kind of single player trend coming back, or single player with multiplayer co-op sort of capabilities, because I just want good stories, and I know that's so hard. Writing is not respected well in the game industry at all because again people think that other people just want to mash X and have colors happen, and sure there are games that are great for that, but I am thrilled to see people finally being cool with single player again.
So, yeah, I understand and hear exactly what you are saying. Like, I, the you mentioning Battlefield, for example, was um a good kind of like, yeah, for it, because uh I know Battlefield more or less started as like not arena, but like a big map based
Yeah.
objective game or what have you, right?
Hmm.
um and the the that era of the late 2010s, or the what have you, the period that we've been leading up to here, like you said, a lot of that was multiplayer, and multiplayer first, to the point where you know Call of Duty releases their multiplayer thing for free because
Right.
they're driven by the microtransactions, or what
Hmm.
have you, right? The good, the bad, the ugly about all of that, totally different conversation. But
Hmm.
either way, like, they realize that we're just going to make people pay for the single player one if that's what they
Hmm.
want. And like, I I agree. It's nice that there are more single player focused games. Bigger games started coming out because like,
Yeah.
it's because even then, some of the ones that had that focus, they then still had the studio pushing
Yes.
for like a multiplayer component or heavy multiplayer integration, which as we've seen in the last year. um
Hmm.
I'm not going to name specific games because I'm not fully educated and I don't want to be saying things that are not entirely correct. But as we've seen for certain studios or games, and games that they failed, or we've seen studios being shut down because of what is reportedly, or rumored, or what have you, to be because of multiplayer components.
Hmm.
um it's as someone that likes the single player games, because I it's easier for me to sit down and play a single player game,
Yeah.
as I'm sure it's for you, as I'm sure it's for a lot of people, right? Not to speak ill on multiplayer games, but like, yes, I'm happy to see that we are getting more, over the last few years, we've been getting more single player focused as well. Cause like,
Hmm.
you know, like I'm currently replaying System Shock, and
Oh,
nothing,
nice.
nothing bad to say about the System Shock remake, in this context or instance. However, all it makes me think of, which is weird, just because I played it first, is thinking of the Prey reboot.
Hmm.
Um, Especially because right now I'm going through the Grove, so I'm going through the
Ah,
area
nice.
of what would be like Prey's garden area or what have you. So like
Hmm.
my brain is like, I really could go for playing Prey right now, but only because I played it first, and what have you. But like, I don't think 5-10 years ago a game like System Shock Remake would have happened, regardless
No.
of Night Dive being the ones saying, no, we're doing this, right? So like, I'm happy to see this focus because, yeah, like you, I'm sure it's nice to just have a good, solid, narrative driven single player game, right?
Exactly. It's just really nice.
So, Akash, I don't want to take up a whole lot more of your time. I do have a few more questions, but I'm just basically
Please.
giving you the heads up that I'm going to start moving you towards getting on with your day, so I'm not stealing your time. Uh, However, I do want to hit you with a few more things, and one of them
Please.
is, more on like a personal level, or an attempt at a personal level. And I only phrase it that way because, you know, um, I know that a lot of people, games are all they do, or the thing that they
Hmm.
enjoy the most to do. And so, it's not to try and like color the question in a negative way, uh, but just outside of games, what do you enjoy doing and how do you relax? And, like I said, I know that a lot of people, it is games. And if that's also the case, that's, I'm not trying to throw shade or what have
For
you with
sure.
that.
Yeah, totally. So, a big part is actually martial arts. So, I love jujitsu and judo. Those are two things I very much enjoy doing. I'll actually be going to judo tonight with my wife, so that'll be fun. But so those sorts of things I really like. Any sort of healthy, fitnessy sort of thing is one of my favorites. Like I will happily read the medical papers of a new like pharmacological drug that is being created right now and be like, oh, this is a GLP-1 agonist. Interesting. Like I love that stuff to absolute death, to absolutely no reason. Like there's like I'm not interested in going into anything professionally in that way at all. But if I see like, oh, there's a new YouTube video about creatine by a molecular biologist, absolutely I'm gonna watch this 4.5 hour video and learn about like the ins and outs of how the creatine molecule works. 100%. So healthy, fitnessy sort of stuff and going deep into the weeds is definitely a big thing that I very much enjoy. But also kind of outside of that, I just love lore of any media. So I will dive deep into lore of like Warhammer 40K or of, games specifically like, the Souls series or anything like that and just be like, all right, tell me how the bullets in the world of Warhammer 40K are blessed by tech priests. Like, give me 10 hours worth of material on this. So, all sorts of stuff, but like everything from health and nutrition to martial arts to just tell me how these space marines are made.
um, oh man, this podcast is not the appropriate place to make a joke about that. However, I am going to ask this, and I am scared that these questions will lead back to this joke. However, I'm going to hit you with two of these real, and they don't have to be fully in depth. It's just more for my own curiosity. So when it comes to like health, fitness, quote unquote lore, is there like a favorite one you've stumbled across over the last little bit that you think people should just tangentially be aware of, or what have you?
Oh man, I can't give any health or medical advice because I ain't no doctor. But boy, have I been enjoying. Oh my god. Okay, here we go. Boy, have I been enjoying. There's a amino acid that we all have called L-carnitine. So amino acids make up proteins, and you get enough of them together. Oh, you got protein. Yay. But one of them is L-carnitine, and people have been, I've been watching these molecular biologists. There's one on YouTube named Physionic, who is a PhD molecular biologist and does deep dive videos for like 12 hours on these molecules, and boy, will I watch them. But he was just talking about how it helps with exercise recovery, and I'm like, all right, I'll try this thing out. And boy, do I feel good. Oh my goodness, I feel so great. Again, this isn't medical advice by any means. Good Lord, please do not take any sort of fitness or medical advice from me. But that's the sort of thing I get into where it's like, this will make me breathe better and not feel like absolute garbage after being thrown on the ground 100 times in judo. Let me try it. Oh, it worked. Cool. So that's the sort of stuff that I definitely get way into. Is like, all right, this is practical and I don't feel like death. Awesome. Hooray.
So thank you for that. And I'm gonna throw this out here. We're not gonna have to sit on this one for long. It's just a throwaway thing because you talking about this made me laugh at the idea of it. So in Canada, for example, when it comes to advertising pharmaceuticals, they're not allowed to say what that pharmaceutical does.
Right.
And as someone that lives in Ontario, close to the border for New York, it means I've had a lot of American channels, I think in just general for Canada as well. So like when I was growing up and watching American channels, it would be like depression ads or, whatever. And it's like, do you feel sad? And it'd become always a little cartoon, but it'd be like, do you feel sad? Do you feel tired? Talk to your doctor about, this drug for depression because you could be suffering from depression, right? So in Canada, that wouldn't be allowed. And I'll use this one because I've been to the theaters a few times in the last little bit, and Ozempic is kind of big right now.
Oh, it's huge.
And so the commercials, the commercials before the movie for it are basically just like, and this is in general for like all of Canadian pharmaceutical things. It's not just for Ozempic. And it's just, like happy people at like a fair and fishing or what have you. And it's like, I asked. And it's just, that's all they're saying. They're just like, so like, you reading about the medical papers or excuse me, or what have you. It just reminds me, or it makes me think of like, was this 100% is not the people, like you're not the audience they were hoping for. They were just
God
hoping
no.
people would like walk into their doctor and be like, the commercials say I need to ask about Ozempic. What is it, right? They're
Right.
not hoping it's going to be like Ozempic. I should read up on this and like read the medical studies and
Right.
everything.
Let me see what's up with this. Just neat.
Um,
Cool.
so sorry, just a weird little tangent that made me think of that as like, in a perfect world, you would be the target audience of those commercials, but that's not
Right.
how it works in the slightest.
No. God no.
Um, and in the same vein of talking about lore, in this case, it is real, actual lore. Do you have like a favorite kind of Warhammer 40K lore? I know you mentioned the tech
Oh
priests
God.
blessing bullets. So if that was it, by all means, that's that's the answer. But like, is there a lore that Warhammer 40K, as absurd as it is, you're like, that's the stuff right there?
What a God, you really got me going on this. I will watch any 25-hour video on what that good emperor of mankind is up to. Is he dead? Is he alive? Is he going to come back in the warp as a new god? Is he going to be the only good god? Is he making deals with the chaos gods? What's his deal? Like that is it. Like I have watched and rewatched so many emperor of mankind lore videos and will continue to do so. Uh until the end of time. But that is definitely the juice I love the most.
So thank you for that. And the I'm not fully aware of the full depth of Warhammer 40K lore, as I don't think many people
No one
are,
is.
just because like you realize it's an iceberg, but then you realize what you think is in depth is just a
Yes.
different subset iceberg. You're like,
Yeah.
what am I reading about? Because like you said,
Exactly.
the good emperor, the god emperor that may or may not actually be dead, or
Right.
or I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Or a right, or whatever it is, the undead things, or maybe he is a anyway.
Yes.
I'm not in the
Exactly.
position. I don't think you want me to start down this path either, because that's a whole kind of thing. But like the uh, the you mentioning Warhammer 40K lore, it's always fun just to start reading about some
Oh.
of it, because it's so bloody absurd. My
Oh.
personal
God.
favorite, just to share, is the fact that the warp, the thing that they
Yep.
use to basically do, I know I'm glossing over because, like I said, I'm not too well versed,
Sure.
but the warp is like the thing they do to do hyperspace travel
Right.
effectively or whatnot. How it's actually just them taking shortcuts through hell to get
It's
to
just
places.
hell.
And like they go through, and sometimes, what's supposed to be like a Gilligan's Isle 4-hour journey, they pop out 60 years later, and they come out and it's a derelict ship minus one group of people who are like, yeah, we went to hell. How long has it been?
Yep.
60 years. Well, our mission's over. Oh, it sucks. We missed the battle. And it's, Space Marines, they're just like, oh, we missed the battle. Damn.
What a shame. And
Yeah.
yep.
But like, that's the thing I love the most about Warhammer stuff, is just the warp as a
Yes.
concept of just like, you guys know this is hell and you're
It's just
doing it,
hell.
and you know that you have no actual control over it. No, we just fling ourselves in and pray. Like,
Yep.
what?
Hopefully it works out.
Is it just you guys doing this? No, all of us. The orcs are
Everyone
in here
does
are
it.
doing it too. The orcs just are screaming loud enough to make it work. It's like,
Yep. Exactly.
what?
I
Anyway,
love it.
yes, that's my favorite part of Warhammer 40K lore, is just the warp, because God, it's so absurd. All of
So
it is,
good.
but that's the thing that makes me the most go, okay, this is a thing. This is an enjoyable thing right here. Anyway, gosh, as I said, I don't want to steal too much more of your time. I want to hit you though with some quick lightning round questions, and then
Please.
I'm gonna shut up and let you get out of here. Is that all good?
That sounds great to me.
Awesome. So thank you for that. It'll take just a second, and we'll fire off some lightning rounds. Which video game character is most likely to call themselves a thirst trap despite having no business doing so, and why?
Ooh, no business doing so. Oh my God. E Honda from Street Fighter, I would say. Very confident man. Absolutely. I'm sure there'll be people who email me after this who are like, no, E Honda's the hottest piece of butt I ever seen. But I'm gonna say E Honda.
Thank you. Uh, yes, yeah, different strokes for different folks. Yes. However, yeah, he probably would have that kind of energy about himself. What personality traits do you feel a pet cat would need to have the name Captain Falcon?
Ooh, that's good. Well, man, oh God, okay. I feel like it would have to have like fur designs on it that are very angular. You would need that kind of Captain Falcon angular look to it. So the fur would have to be built in there. It'd have to have an intense look in its eyes at all times. But it would have to be able to wink at you and give you a little saucy thumbs up. I think that's what it would need to be able to do so that you can feel that, okay, this cat is going to take care of me and is the hero of this story. I feel like that's what it would need. It would need to be able to give a wink and a saucy thumbs up.
So thank you for that. Now I'm gonna hit you with a new one. So, which game character do you think is most likely to have an existential crisis about learning that the heat death of the universe is not only going to destroy everything they've known and ever loved, but also the very memory of it?
Ooh, I this isn't a video game only character, but Peter Parker from the hit game Spider-Man. Because that poor boy is having an existential crisis 24/7 about everything, about his failing relationship with his wife, about Doc Ock, about the Green Goblin, and etc. And I think the second that other stuff starts to creep in, oh boy, Spider-Man's not gonna have a good time.
So, thank you for that. And as someone that has grown up where Spider-Man was their number one guy in terms of
Hmm.
superheroes and whatnot. Yeah, yep, you're probably very spot on that, that is probably one of those things that he intentionally does not think about because he's a smart boy. He knows
Yes,
these things exist. He probably intentionally has to stop himself every now and then to avoid that death spiral.
he's a scientist. He can't not know.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, so Akash, like I said, I did want to just hit you with a few promo questions. I
Please.
do want to work towards getting you out of here. So thank you so much for, for playing along with my lightning round, for taking that new question in stride as well. Uh, but like I said, I want to let you get going because you said you're going to go to judo with your wife tonight. You're probably going to have to prepare for that or just finish out the rest of your Monday day or what have you. However, if there was anything else you want to talk about, a cool game, what you're doing, something you just feel more people should be aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. As well, please let everyone know where they can find more information about you so I can include that in the episode description.
Absolutely. So I will give a non-self plug first for an old game that nobody played, called Asura's Wrath, which is actually made by some of the people who made Okami. But Asura's Wrath is one of the greatest games ever made. One of my best friends, Ryan Ike, and I played it not too long ago. Completed it from start to finish. And if you like beautiful anime nonsense, please, for the love of God, play Asura's Wrath. It's ruined my life that I've played this game because I think it is one of the most perfect things ever made, and no one's played it, and I'll never be able to talk about it. So I'm cursed. Now, for my own personal stuff, so you can find me. You can just type in Akash Thakkar anywhere on Google. There's not a lot of people named that, so you can just look that up and find me, or you can go to akashthakkar.com for my website, or just type in Akash Thakkar on any social media, and I'll pop right up. But if you are interested in breaking into the game audio world, you can go to my website. You can send me an email. You can join any of my free courses that teach how to network, kind of the stuff we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, how to break in. Any of that stuff. I have hundreds of videos on my YouTube channel that help people break into the industry and understand sound design as well. So feel free to watch those.
So, thank you so much for being a guest and for being sorry, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this doesn't sound patronizing or what have you. But thank you so much for being a cool dude that is wanting to help people
Yeah.
get into doing this and like we talked about at the beginning, get paid and be able to pay their rent. I
Hmm.
think that's a really admirable thing that, is nice to see happening, because, it's not always easy out there. And knowing that there is groups of people that are devoting their time to trying to make it easier is a wonderful thing to know. And I just wanted to let you know, thank you for being here, being on the episode, and for also doing that. Because, like I said, I think it's really admirable, and I think it's just a cool thing that more people should be aware of. Because, Anyway, I don't know where I'm trying to go with that one, because I think I'm just going to ramble. But thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was very, very fun. What a blast.
I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. I am always happy that my guests, whoever I speak to, has fun. Because whenever, one of the things I've spoken to some people, and they're like, this is my first podcast, and I'm like, I hope it's not your last. I hope I don't ruin this for you. So I'm happy to hear that you had fun, because it means I didn't ruin this for you.
No, definitely not. This was very, very fun.
Now, Akash, as I said, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, so if there wasn't anything else, I will definitely let you get going.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm all good here.
Awesome. So thanks again to Akash for making time to have this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Roland Jenkins for the use of music from the title track from Road Steep. And be sure to check out the episode description to links for socials, websites, and other means that will allow you to learn more about or support Akash and the podcast. And while you're doing that, share, like, follow, and whatever else you think makes the algorithm work. Thanks, until next time.